The book, you have that kind of screenplay gift of you kick it off with such a great hook. We're in immediately with your drive and this text from your mother.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of like my prologue, because that's how you say it in literary terms. But my prologue is in what television we call a teaser. And then I kind of take you back.
Yeah. And in real terms,
yes,
was that text from your mother saying, we've got something to talk about, was that when the idea of the book came along, or was that much later?
Oh, no, much later. So around the time that my parents, the book has a lot of reveals, a lot of personal reveals, but one of the big ones, and if you don't want the spoiler, then turn down your volume, but one of the big reveals in the book is that my dad is not my biological father, that I was conceived with the help of a sperm donor. When my parents gave me this information, I was actually in the process of selling a different book idea. Scandal had just ended, and I was going to write this, kind of fun, reflective, but really fun book about the 10 things I learned from Olivia Pope.
Yeah.
And I sold that book idea, and I kind of compartmentalized this information from my parents. I thought I'll deal with that when I need to deal with that. But every time I sat down to write the book I was being paid to write, I couldn't write it. If I was going to write about myself and what I knew, all I could really think about was myself and all the things I didn't know now. And so I tried to give my money back to the publisher. I was like, I cannot write this book. But they were really patient with me and encouraged me. And eventually I told my publishing house what was happening in my personal life. And my publisher, Tracy, was like, well, maybe you could try to write that book. So I did.
But also, you kind of wrote the other book too, I would say.
I did in some ways. There are a couple chapters that are filled with the things that not only Olivia Pope told me, but all of the different characters I've played. I feel like they've been mentors to me, all these women, because as an actor, you get to drop into their life at these pivotal moments when they're learning a big life lesson.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten to learn those life lessons and then incorporate them into my life. And now, once I understood this new revelation from my parents, I realized why I had spent so much time kind of looking for myself in these characters. I was always looking to understand more about myself or have more clarity about who I was. I often felt more clear about who characters were than who I was.
Yeah. And I always think it's fascinating with a book like this where it is clearly your story. This is Kerry Washington's story. And yet you share the story with other people.
Yes.
Like you detail some of the difficulties in your parents' marriage when you were a child.
Yes.
How were they about all of that? And were you kind of giving them little bits and kind of going, this okay?
No, I didn't share along the way because I think it would have really crippled me. I don't think I would have written the book I've written as honestly as I've written it if I was sort of seeking their approval along the way. But I did write the book that I felt very called to write, and then I shared it with them before sending it to the publisher. And my parents have been so incredible. I mean, one of the things I've said to people is when they gave me this information, I realized my family had kind of been doing this dance, this sort of performance of this perfect family where we had no issues. And in some ways, I had been like a supporting character in the story of their lives. And when they gave me this information, it was an opportunity for me to become kind of the lead character in the story of my life and maybe let them be supporting characters if they were willing. And they have been. They've been so proud and so supportive. My dad is quick to say it's not necessarily the book he would have written.
But also, I'm interested, is it how they remembered it? Because obviously you're seeing it through a child's eyes.
Yes, there's some dissonance. There are places where we don't agree, where we've agreed to disagree. But they've been really supportive of my process. And most of it, I mean, my mom's also a retired professor. So when she read it, she came to my house and gave me a huge hug and said, I'm so proud of you. It's so beautifully written. It's so honest. It's so lovely. And I have some notes. And she had like red markings and Post-its, and she was fact-checking me. But it was helpful. She made the book better.
And I think one of the things is because you're an only child, you get all the love, but now you get all the responsibility.
Yes, it's you get all the pressure as an only child. You do get all the love, all the attention, and also all the pressure and responsibility, as you so beautifully said. Yeah.
And one of the themes of the book, which surprised me, is swimming.
Yes.
Because you don't think about a little girl growing up in the Bronx. I'm like a mermaid, me. But so tell us about where you grew up.
So I grew up in the Bronx in Jamie Towers, and it was 4 buildings in this kind of working class neighborhood. We had a pool in the center of our 4 buildings, which was like the crown jewel of our neighborhood. And then when I was a little bit older, my parents bought a tiny cabin in upstate New York on a lake. But when I started to write, I realized so many of our really important family memories centered around swimming, whether it was in the pool or the lake or in the ocean. from my parents' first date ending at the beach in Brooklyn to, memories of swimming across the lake for the first time with my dad. I mean, just our family really is the culture of our family is really centered around water.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're very good at it. So you tell a story about when Olivia Pope was swimming.
Yes, well, I was on the swim team in high school and during Scandal years, which I want to say, of course, we're on an actor strike, so I'm not encouraging anybody to watch Scandal right now until we have a new contract, and then you can watch as much as you want. Okay. But I think it was our second season of Scandal, Shonda Rhimes said to me, "Do you have any special skills that we should know about that we could write into the show?" And I was like, "Well, I'm on the swim team. I was on the swim team in high school." And then 2 episodes later, I'm reading a script and somebody asked the president of the United States where Olivia Pope is. And it's like, oh, she's stressed out. She's thinking she's probably swimming. And somebody's like, does she swim? And he says, she was on the swim team in high school. So it's funny in TV how your life gets woven into the narrative. And
one of the things I didn't know about you is that you're one of those kids. You were a child actor.
I was. I not as seriously as a lot of other people, but yeah, in grade school and middle school, I started auditioning and acting. And the job that made me join the union was an after-school special where I played an unnamed cheerleader, but I had a few lines.
Yeah, but it became like a big thing. Like your money mattered.
Yeah, it did. It really did. And commercials, it mattered, and I think in a lot of ways it was confusing for me because in theater, I really, really loved it. I loved to kind of lose myself in these characters. If I was playing a toy boat in The Velveteen Rabbit or an orphan in Annie, I just full on committed 100%. And then I would go on these auditions for commercials where it felt like it was more about the money and I didn't have the same kind of passion or attachment.
Yeah. But then you were good and you found good work, which doesn't always happen.
I'm so lucky. It's so rare to be able to make a living doing what you love to do in any profession. Yeah. You know that. But being able to find a working, a way of existing as an actor is such a miracle. I'm very grateful.
And then in the book you talk about this weird thing that happened to you where you act opposite people who win Oscars.
Yes, twice in a row. If you hire me to play your wife, you might win an Oscar, both in Last King of Scotland and in Ray, acting opposite Jamie Foxx and Forest Whitaker, which I won't take credit. Those are extraordinary performances, but I did start to feel like a bit of a talisman.
But you also talk about that kind of weird, and we often hear about it, but I loved reading about what it was like being in an actual Oscar race where you were in the mix.
It's true. It is really a campaign. I suddenly realized why it's called a race, because it's like a political race. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And is it how stressful is it?
Well, I was really lucky in those years because I was kind of on the periphery of these Oscar races. It wasn't my performance necessarily that was in the running, but the films were. So it was very stressful, but not as stressful as it was for Jamie or Forrest, I'm sure.
Yeah, but then they won. So,
they won, so it's worth it, I guess.
Get over it.
Get a massage and move on.
Tell me about Jamie Foxx's advice when you were acting opposite him.
There are so many moments in this book that are like a love story, a love poem for Jamie. I'm so grateful. He's been such an amazing mentor and friend and ally, co-conspirator. But early on in Ray, he noticed it one day when I was trying to repeat myself, which is like death for an actor. You can't just recreate magic. You have to keep mining it, kind of keep stirring it up, stay open to it. And he reminded me of that. He taught me that you have to stay curious, stay searching, stay open, and act as if everything's happening for the very first time, not look for something that happened 2 hours ago. So he's been a real tremendous mentor and had such an impact on me as an artist and as a professional. People always say, you're such a great leader on set. And I always blame Jamie because he is such a beautiful leader, so generous.
Yeah. And in the book, we found in the book, you're now a producer, you've got your own production company, and you've got your kind of political life as well, your advocacy. And I wondered, that advocacy and kind of putting your head above the parapet and kind of going, I have a voice, I'm going to use it. Has that affected your career, do you think?
That's such a good question. I mean, I think part of the commitment to remaining active in civic engagement is to not let my fame quiet me. I think that can be often the seduction of like, oh, I want to keep my fans, so I don't want to offend anyone, but it's been really important to me to stay active. I think democracy only works when everybody shows up. And so I think it's mostly impacted my career in positive ways, because the work that I do as a producer is the same as the work that I do in civic engagement or politics. It's my deep, deep belief that all of us matter, that we all deserve to be seen and heard, that we all deserve to feel like the lead character in the story of our lives. And whether that means showing up in our communities and volunteering and voting and making phone calls and participating, or whether that means creating content where our protagonists look like all of us, so that we are reminded that we're all heroes. We all deserve to be heroes.
Yeah,